well, I think I'm actually getting just tired of writing everything down. It's becoming a bit of a pain. But I'm just following the media situation of this Middle East conflict, and I'm just a bit disappointed because like some of the most interesting and basic facts are just overlooked. Everyone gets into this like pretty complicated analysis of what's going on, and right down to the point where it's all geopolitical or it's military strategy. But there's all these assumptions that are being made, and these are the most interesting parts because nothing's ever what it seems, whether it's science or politics or whatever. Um, it's quite often it's completely not what you expect. So starting with the premise of this whole Israel thing. Yes, Palestinians were kicked out of their land in 1948. And yes, there was violence and bloodshed and slaughter, and yes, there were basically a refugee population. The settlers, the Yishuv, whatever it was, after the Balfour Declaration, were not. Well, yes, they were Jews. Some of them were Holocaust survivors, and there is an element of that. That is true. Not that it justifies it, but the Zionist project that it is in a direct conflict with the core tenet of Judaism, which is you cannot establish a Jewish state. So the whole premise is Zionist is you cannot if you're practicing Judaism, you can't be a Zionist, and vice versa. They're mutually exclusive. And you can ask the Jewish population that does practice Judaism and that is aware of this and protests regularly, in Israel. So the whole framing of this as a Muslim versus Jew thing is wrong. In Palestine, in Palestine, Gaza, even part of the local regional government is actually Christian. I think about 15% actually. It's quite a lot of them. There are a small minority of Jews there as well, I think, and it's a majority Muslim, but it's not actually about the Bible. It's not about the Bible. I don't know if Christians want to make it about the Bible because they want Jesus to come again or something like that. So they kind of this could be a huge motivation for a lot of Christians. I mean, I don't want to presume that, but it's got to be something. I'm grasping at straws here. Now, even more interesting is that you often hear never forget after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, what happened there, and it was shocking, and the full horror of it is kind of realized afterwards. And this is why the world is so shocked by it, because it's the footage and the shock impact of it, and, when you actually realize what's happening. But when they said never forget, they didn't mean like go next door and also look for Lebanon's wrong, also put the locals in ghettos and concentration camps, and also do the genocide just a bit slower. I don't think that's what never forget meant. I really don't. But what is the difference? What is the difference? There is no difference. This is exactly the same thing. But it's considered controversial to point out that the Israel copied the Nazis exactly. This is somehow denied. They just deny it. But it's true. It's a fact. So this is obviously a problem. It's definitely not about the Bible. I hear there was no Palestine, even though you can go back to Roman Palestine, what the Romans called it, and those lands in Canaan were. It doesn't actually matter. It's so long ago. This is for the West. This is not actually important. This is for the West that you have to go through this garbage, which is not really what it's about at all. It's if you look at these DNA investigations that they do, whether it's Africa or America, what is it? It just ends up being white settlers again, doesn't it? It's always white settlers, isn't it? I'm sorry to say it, but this is the truth. and it's no different in Israel. The the Hebrews or the Israelites of the Bible are more closely related to the Palestinians, or I suppose the Philistines as well. They came from this actually from the Sea Peoples. During the Bronze Age collapse, there was the feather hat. Anyway, it's not important, but it's quite complex. And but most of the Ashkenazi are the Turkic, Russian, Georgian area, Caucasus, former Khazar converts, from yonks ago. And I think most of the immigrant populations actually are still Russian Jews. It's actually amazing that America hates Russia so much, but I mean, go figure. Um, these are converts. So I mean, this whole birthright thing, your mother's got to be, this is more of a push for an ethno-Zionist sort of. You can't say Jewish supremacist state because you cannot be Jewish and a Zionist. So I mean, this is the farce of the whole thing. People don't seem to know these things. They don't seem to know that they don't realize that in Gaza it's a concentration camp. That you can't leave. You can't go somewhere. You don't have rights, freedom of movements, and stuff like this. They just want death and destruction or whatnot. Well, how do you know? How do you know that they don't want basic rights and freedom of movement and to be able to actually just be respected and have some dignity? They've never had that before. So how do you know that they don't want that? Why don't you give them that? And if they still don't accept that, well, then you can accuse them of the next thing. But I don't think it's fair to do that. Do you? I mean, do you? You've got to give a person the benefit of the doubt. I mean, unless these people who say these things, do they know what it was like to be born in a prison as a refugee? Born children of refugees who were kicked off their own land. And the law of return, talk about the farce already, You can't, half these people had homes. They just went to, you know what I'm saying? You can't keep people who are living there, whose parents live there now, for some, even if it was 100% valid, like the West thinks it is. I mean, it's so long ago, But to be fair, it's been a while now, and, Israel's been there for so long. Who in good conscience could say they don't have a right to exist? I don't think that's fair either. I think the indoctrination must stop. I think it reminds me very much of South African apartheid era. As a young kid, there was a huge percentage of the white demographic in this country that had that exact mentality, that hard, deep set in way of justifying sort of treating people differently. Although it really there's a huge irony going on in the West at the moment, those values. So I'm quite curious to see how this pans out, actually, as a social experiment, apart from anything else. So, I mean, how do you? Okay, so with these basic premises, you've got to, unless you want to debate that it's not a concentration camp and that they have rights and that they have freedom or whatnot, but you're going to look like an idiot because it's just not true. Anybody knows this, and they say this on prime time television, as if it's debatable. I mean, you've never seen ignorance like this, never. It's unbelievable. But the thing is, the information is getting quite easy to access. So I'd like to see how this pans out, because the woke sort of project that's been going on, the social engineering that's been going on, is surely bound to blow up in the faces of this whole Zionist project. I mean, even Biden, who parading as a woke activist somehow with his history, it's just amazing what some of these Americans will swallow. It amazes me. But he said himself in the 80s, if there was no Israel, they would have to create one, because it's basically propped up and backed up, and with the implied threat of the military-industrial might of the United States and the direct support, no one's going to mess with him. In terms of standing armies, Israel can't defeat Turkey, let alone Iran, let alone an alliance there, whatnot, they know this. I'd be surprised if they could defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon. They're not going to be, but with the Americans, it's a different story. But what shape are the Americans in at the moment? There wasn't a space for apartheid South Africa, and I don't see why there should be a space for an apartheid Israel. Haul out somebody every time there's a Hamas lash out and ask them to condemn it. Seems like a cheap tactic to me, like a really cheap tactic. How many times can you do that? And if the person doesn't condemn it, you make them appear like they're condoning the violence. But they repeatedly will say that they reject the premise of it. That you can't invite somebody onto live television with an ambush like that, which they're waking up to, they're getting wise to it, and then say that you're giving coverage, because unless it was completely brainwashed and completely, in a bigoted sense, because it is bigoted. It's bigoted, and it's going to come. Get on the right side of history now is what I'd suggest. Honestly, I would. And not in every group you're going to get. No one's perfect. But you can't judge people who don't have basic rights and basic dignity, who are being oppressed by a certain group, of doing anything other than rebelling, not attacking. It's not you can't criticize the Arab leaders. The Arab leaders are under huge amounts of pressure from the West, and that's not their decision. There's these veiled character judgments, absent of context, are actually quite disgusting, I think. And people will just tell themselves and chant these mantras over and over again with no interest in understanding anything. They're not hard to understand. It's not hard. These principles are very easy to understand. They're supposed to be the basic principles that the West is predicated on. It walks like a duck, and it talks like a duck, and it sounds like a duck, and it fucking is a duck. So if you're censored, repressed, channeled into a particular pen of beliefs, you cannot have certain opinions. You don't get jobs. They won't hire you if you have you can't have protests. Your bank accounts get frozen or whatnot. You can't go around preaching, "Oh, we're free," like you're not in a glass house throwing stones. You don't have any moral high ground. You are now exactly who you think you are preaching to. You become that. It's too late. You already are that. It's not a danger. Not might happen or whatnot. It's long since happened. And I just think that's a perspective worth just keeping that in mind.